Kia ora folks, obviously a cartographer from Linz. I love maps, and so the clutter is something I often see in maps, and there's some simple ways to remove that and really help your maps. So we'll talk about clutter and cognitive load, a little bit of history, data ink war, horrible times, and then some techniques and examples just so we can look at some beautiful maps and think about it. Just one of my maps, so I can show you my beautiful maps. No, so I can prove I know what I'm talking about, and probably one a little bit more close to home from the 2019 conference where the attendees came in from. And clutter. So clutter is this too much at once. And so the idea is that you've got this idea of cognitive load, the mental effort to take in new information, and you can think of it like a bucket of water. The more you put in, eventually it reaches the top and you can't have too much. So too many things and you've reached that top level. Another way to think about it is a messy bedroom. So if you've got drawers and you've got these other parts, you can put the clothes away, the information away, you can get it as you need it. But if it's all a mess, then hopefully your socks are red and you can quickly find them, otherwise you're out of luck. So here's a little example. On the left there's a lot going on, and on the right there's not. And so you can find the information more readily. But once again, cartographies, there's subtleties here. So this could be for a scientific audience, and this could be what they're used to, and they know what information to expect, and they can kind of almost tune out to it, so the one on the left may actually suit them better. So it's all about the who it's for. So the bad, obviously hard to read, but it can also push people away. So this is an idea from Chris McDowell, New Zealand cartographer, and he was talking about how as spatial people and as cartographers we love the information. We've got a higher threshold, almost like I imagine someone who's super obsessed with jazz could go crazy places with that, or heavy metal, or whatever you feel like. Maybe I'm thinking Metallica, but I love crazy weird symbols and deciphering and figuring that out, and even a topo map's beautiful and wonderful, but if you've never seen it before, that's a lot of stuff. So don't forget to think about your reader and not just about your love of cartography. So this information you're trying to present can be thought of as the signal, and the other stuff getting in the way is your noise. This idea comes from Nancy Duarte, Resonate, but Tufte sort of also talks about with the data ink ratio. And this is just a lovely example from one of Tufte's books, and you can see the top one, you've got this noise. The black borders, the black figures make it really hard to see the other information because you're just drawn to it, you can't help yourself. But then the bottom one where you've got the waving and the arrows and the chance for the text to breathe, and the information's all still there. Like you've got because it's in a grid, we naturally put things into their own buckets. Our eyes just do that for us. So it's still there, but we can see the information now. And this one from Cole, from the Storytelling with Data, like the chart's a good chart, it has information, it's not a waste of time, but the second it's been refined, like you don't have that line, you can't easily see the value, but because it's been labelled directly, you don't need that, and the important information's been labelled, and not everything. And we'll get back to the idea of focused as well later. And so this is just an example of beautiful Wanganui, hope you visit. But here, your map example, you've got lots of information laid over the top. It's hard to pull it apart. And just by moving it away, thinking about your colours and whatnot, it becomes open and easier to read and a lot clearer. And a little detour with the idea of the elegant and the invisible. So mapping's not so much like, say, I guess, poetry or something. You don't read and think, oh, that was wonderful prose. The idea is hopefully they don't even notice the techniques I'm using. They just naturally read it, get the information they need and move on. They don't think about, oh gosh, it's really lovely. Pete did a lovely sort of wafty line there. It wasn't a solid line. It was and the words failing me, but they're just, the line's there and they naturally can see the object and see the line, but it's not a harsh black line because I've chosen it and they're not distracted by it. It's just this lovely little technique. And it could be the same with your masks. So wonderful QGIS workshop. Got reminded that I should be using masks more, and now I can't wait to go play with them again. But the line from the river going through my text isn't getting in the way because it's been cut out, and I don't think about that line. I don't think, oh, that's great that they cut it out and I can read it. I just naturally read the text and I see the river. So the elegant and the invisible. So we'll move a little bit into the history, and hopefully at the end of it we'll have a little bit more of a nuanced view of the data. So in the 90s, Tufte was pushing back against these charts with illustrations that were coming into Time magazine, And he was saying that they showed contempt for the reader. The graphs themselves should speak enough, right? People are smart, they should be so engaged in this material that they should pick it on, and they don't need this. And further to that, the idea of graphical excellence with clarity, precision, efficiency, and his little idea of greatest ideas, shortest time, least ink, smallest space, which leads to the data ink ratio. Ink that encodes data divided by total ink. So the more that encodes, the better in his mind. And this is a lovely one from Menard, and it's Napoleon's armies travelling into Russia and the casualties and what they come back with. And there's not much on the page, but so much information. Counter-arguments, so John Grady was saying, look, this is not based on research and facts, it's just sort of essays. And his sort of idea was, what about boredom? Or we love novelty and interesting things. What about that? How are you pulling these people in? But there was a study that showed there was no difference in effectiveness, but there was a difference in how memorable they were. But there was lots and lots of variety in the responses based on the individual. So once again, back to who's it for and have I thought about them and what I need to put on the page. And this one, it's a little bit blurry, but it's a lovely one from the Atlas of Design, and it's quite heavy ink, really thick lines, lots of solid reds. It's really sort of oppressive, but that's the actual feel of the map that they're going for. If they remove this, it would be have less of an effect, less memorable, the data wouldn't come through the same. So in this case, even though it's extra ink, it serves a purpose. Another little detour, so this is Don Norman, whose original book, The Design of Everyday Things, with that lovely teapot that was on the cover, had a very mechanical process of how you create objects and visuals and how you learn to use them. But he came back in another book, Emotional Design, and said, it's not the full story, there's another side to it, it's not all purely mechanical. You can have your visceral reactions, it's your colours, your smells, your tastes, hopefully you're not eating maps, your behavioural and this is your iPod, what is it enjoyable to use sort of idea here. But the one I love is the idea of reflective. Is there something there that has you thinking about it afterwards, reflecting on it? And so part of that can be your thinking, and each time you come, you remember it, and so you're more likely in a week's time to remember whatever that was trying to show you. But also you're reflecting on it. You're taking that information and not just, there was that information, but what does it mean for me? What do I think about that information? It could be sort of something to do with social deprivation, and what does that mean? Or healthcare access, what does that mean? And it sits there in the back of your brain. So far, the more we add, the heavier the cognitive load, the more mental effort. We can reduce the noise and increase the signal, but it's not just about this data ink, it's about, do those elements serve a purpose for what I'm trying to do? Is it context and it's worthwhile, or is it too much context and I don't need it all? Or is it just big heavy borders like Tufte's one and we can get rid of those? So we'll dive into some techniques and examples. We'll talk a little bit about simplicity from sacrifice, a little bit on contrast, hierarchy, layout, white space. A lot of it's sort of focusing on removing that noise or helping us focus on the information that's the most important. So simplicity from sacrifice. I like to think of cartography as more akin to sculpture than to painting. You're not layering on, layering on, layering on. I have information there and I'm pulling bits away, or I'm reducing it, so maybe it's not a big thick road carriage, it's a very light road carriage, or my dashed lines or whatnot. And so I'm pulling and I'm checking in with is the main thing still the focus? Are they getting the information? So you have a study that said it wasn't the number of objects, but it was the number of types. So you can have lots of buildings, beautiful lens building outlines all over the page, but if there was too many types, then it's too much to take in. And you can play with this a bit more. You can look at your topo maps, and there's lots of different kinds of roads, but you can almost compartmentalise them in your mind, because at least there's sort of all orange colours and whatnot. You say, there's roads, and then when I want to dive in further, I can explore the kinds of roads that are there, you know. But if it's lots and lots of roads and lots of rivers and lots of urban areas, then there's a lot to take in. And this is just a lovely Topo 50 example. So if it's raw aerial imagery, you can't really see much. You can get some feel of the landscape because you can see some fields and I can kind of make out some urban areas. But this other one, this reducing down of what they do in a topo map. But don't forget, they're also making conscious choices here. So you can see these hedgerows And that's the feel of this area as an orchard, and it's important to capture that feel. You want those hedgerows in this area. Maybe it's less important in some other farming areas where it is just big sort of fields and paddocks. And these little townships, is there enough building points there that you get the feel that that is a little bit built up, that there's a little bit going on there. And this one is the centre there of Ukraine. There's a lot of cities that are missing, a lot of roads that are missing, but it still gives the feel of where the population are, and then the rest of that cognitive load can be taken up by the information around the edge. So by removing, they can sort of add more to the other areas. So we'll move on to some contrast and some hierarchy and layout. So this is one from Nightingale, Data Viz Society, it's a little magazine, and it's the idea of the focus is the next step. So declutter is great, we've removed this extra info, but the focus lets us almost have separate buckets. So there's one I look at first, and there's a second, and so I can have lots more cognitive load that way, but it helps the reader not just have a whole lot of information, but focus on what do I want them to focus on, what do I want them to see, and how do I lead them through that. And a lovely mapping example, and here you can see the river, and you look there first, like it's been focused. But then this little lovely inset with the shadow, like I noticed that second, and it kind of, because of the drop shadow, I take it in as one. And then I might look at the background info. So there's these sort of layers of information as I read them in order. And choosing to have them desaturated and choosing to have ways of focusing helps them know where to start, the reader. And this is all sort of related to visual hierarchy. So this is your emphasising. So the most important information is visually the most important. And a lack of order feels disorganised, haphazard and uncomfortable. And that can flow on through to your data, right? So people take it as disorganised, and they sort of assume the data is almost disorganised, and you don't want that. You want them to value this data underneath. And this is a wonderful diagram from GIS Body of Knowledge. And so what you would often see is sort of design textbooks, maybe a Coke ad, and at the top they would show that the word Coke in white is what you notice first, and then you notice the bubbles or whatnot. But this is done the same for a map. I don't quite agree, and maybe it's just because of the size of it. Like, I don't notice that purple line first, and I actually notice the blue of the sea before I notice the land, and I notice the white of the boxes before the black. But it's this sort of levels of information that I read, and the importance of it, and what do I want to focus on first. And this is a cool little idea from a Daniel Huffman talk on full monochrome mapping from NASIS. And ignore the red part, I probably should have chosen a better image, but because he was focusing on purely monochrome, white to black, he was then sort of going through this idea of like related stuff, taking up sort of bandwidths almost. So you have certain types of features are in these greys, and certain other types are in these. And the closer the bandwidths are, the harder it is to pull them apart, to pull these layers of hierarchy apart. But if you have that space, they have their own little bandwidths, then you pull them apart and you let people focus on what they need to focus on. And you can move that into your visual hierarchy. So it's not just your greys, but it's your prominence. Is it the centre of the page? Is it saturated colours, or is it complex features? And have those sort of in their own little bandwidths, and have a think about how much you notice them or don't notice them. And once again, beautiful topo map, but it's, you've got on the left, there's this sort of idea of macro, micro, but at that higher level I can see these sort of urban areas, and I can differentiate that from sort of forests or hills. And so there's sort of certain symbology there which lets me pull these sort of features out and notice them, but then I can still zoom in and I can choose to pull these different parts out. And once again, I've got my orange roads, and I'm sort of noticing major roads and off roads and thinking about that. And then I'm sort of noticing next maybe the fields or the river, and I'm pulling that out and thinking about it separately. So this knowledge is sort of broken down and made it easier to not feel like clutter, but information that I can take in when I feel like it. And this is just a nice example too. There's actually quite a lot going on because that's a detailed background of it, but because it's desaturated, because it's light, it sinks into the background. I can notice the information first and then move on down to that. And if it was all together, it would feel very cluttered and it would be hard to see, but because of these little techniques, it feels lovely. And a little bit on layout. So this is just another way we can guide them through the page, to get the information as and when they need it. So you've got natural ways of reading information. You've got your F patterns, you read along the page like this, and your Z patterns, and you can see the little diagram is capturing where people have looked on a page as a heat map. And you can do that with your cartography. So it's not all the information all at once. I can lead you through, maybe a little heading first, some important information, or part of a legend which says, hey, look at this feature, and then I have a part of a legend later on, hey, look at this feature now, don't take it all in at once. You've got balance and white space, so mostly for this diagram it's all about the balance. If it's all clustered together, then it feels a lot more cluttered, and if it's spaced and it's balanced, it feels nicer. And balance has this, sort of similar to that other idea of the clutter, where if it feels off balance, you notice it's a little bit, and it feels odd, but you don't even notice. It's intuitively that you don't like it, So as opposed to intuitively reading it, and I'm leading you through the design, this is the opposite side of it. And white spaces. I love white space. It's this chance to take a breath. So this idea of the space between it, the negative space is as important as the data itself. And I love this idea of this rhythm of emptiness used to create uncluttered spaces, so it can be some information, a bit of space to breathe, to think, and then you move on to the next bit, space to breathe and think. And I love this map as an example of this. So there's lots of examples of the white space and pulling information. So you've got your little bit at the top left there. I can read the heading. I can move on to these other two, or I can see they're kind of separate and related, and I can just have a look at the map. And even in the map itself, all these pockets of text, there's a hierarchy there. There's lighter and darker text, but they're also not just a clump of text. I can read one and get a feel for what that will be, and maybe I want to read the rest, or maybe I want to observe the rest of the map. So there's quite a bit of information. If it was all just slammed on there, it would be cluttered, and I wouldn't be able to pull apart the bits. But now I feel I can take a breath, and I can take my time, and I can read the bits that I want to read. I've already sort of mentioned the idea of it's a chance to reflect. There's a little bit of space in there, and I can sort of not just constantly read. Here in this map, if it was all just a body of text, that would be a lot to take in, but I can take in one of them. Get the feel what each of these will be, maybe think about, I think it's wine varieties, maybe vineyards or something. Read those and then move on, or choose to look at the overall picture of it. There's further lots of bits and pieces you can go into here. Generalisation, so you might, once again, building outlines. Is it lots of buildings? Have I reduced it to building points? Have I thinned those out further? But does it still have a feel? Does it still feel like a little township at the crossroads? Or do I need to put those buildings back in there? You got your Gestalt, this sort of way we, little shortcuts our brain takes, because we don't want to process a whole image. Our brain does little shortcuts to put it all together, and you can hijack those. So the example there would be, back in the day, maybe some sort of predator, the ears are poking out over the grass, and you would look at that and you don't go, oh, I wonder what else is there. You go, oh, ears done, I'll fill in the blanks and I'll move on. And so for a map, the one I love is your tracks. And so I don't see, with a dash line, I don't see lots of little dash lines. I go, wow, there's 50 tracks there. I just naturally put it all together and it's one track. But in terms of this, that reduces the heaviness of the line, and it can sink into the background, so I can get all the information there, but these dash lines let it pull back. And then clarity, once again, wonderful masks. So can you read the text? Are things overlapping, or can you cut some bits out? And that just helps these separation. Or maybe it's on a topo map, you've moved a river slightly so that the road doesn't have the weird overlap. It's not geographically correct, but it helps to read the map. So clutter's just too much all at once. We can reduce the cognitive load, we can enhance, we can remove, we can think about our visual hierarchy and how are we going to enhance in certain gaps with this this bandwidth in between. We can think about the order and the space and a chance to breathe. But hopefully what it becomes is this intuitive, you're just reading it, getting it as and when you need the information, just naturally happening, and don't even think about what you're reading. Hopefully it's welcoming, and I guess at the foremost, is it about the user and what can they take in or not take in. So thank you.
Thank you, Pete. That was really good. Do we have any questions? Yep.
Hey, in one of your slides earlier, you had a illustration on the right-hand side where it had the map at the top, and then it had a kind of diagram showing what you look at. That one. What was that from?
It's an online cartography GIS resource, GIC body of knowledge. I feel like it's an American university, but it's quite cool. I can dig it up and send it to you. But yeah,
Thank you.
it's really cool. But I loved it because I hadn't seen it put together that way before as a way of thinking about the visual hierarchy. I'd seen it used in design, but it was really nice to see it for spatial, and you can see it and see the levels and the layers.
Anyone else?
Thank you for the wonderful talk. I'm curious if you've seen maps or examples of maps where it is very cluttered and it is a lot of information, but that it actually turns out to be good, or is it typically just the simpler the better? Is that always the case?
Absolutely based on the audience, right? Your Topo 50 could be considered cluttered, and if you've never looked at the symbology in those before, it's a lot to take in all at once, and it's heavy. But the beauty of it, it's all there, right? I can look for a track and I can see the towns nearby, relatedness, I can see the contours, the slopes, all these things, the types of land cover, because it's all there and it serves a purpose, and having it all in one map suits a lot of people, can use it for all their different uses. And you can get the same with, is it a particular audience who can take in that information? You know, you might get your sort of bivariate maps, where if you're not used to it and you don't understand it, it takes a bit. But for someone who's maybe used to that subject matter, they can suddenly see the relationship together of these variables, and it is useful and wonderful, you know? So yes, that's a great question.
Yeah, thanks for the talk, it's really interesting. If you had sort of one resource, I noticed you had like a bunch of different references for different resources, but if you had to name one, this is the key resource as a cartographer to read or look at or understand, do you have like a particular favourite? I love my books, but there's sort of levels of what you'd start in, and then it's nice to grab another one and get exposed to other ideas. So I kind of went with, what's his name? How to Lie with Maps, which isn't How to Lie with Maps, but I leave it by my desk just to confuse people. But that's a wonderful sort of exploration of generalisation and the starts, you know, and then you can move on. What's Edward Cairo's one, which I leave next to it, about like the truthful art. So I've got lying and truth and confuse people even more, and that's wonderful. But I loved Tufte, so I wouldn't remember, but years and years ago, he taught a QGIS course, and there was also one by Kurt as well at the same time. But he listed some resources, and one of them was Tufte's, a place to go to think about this. How to take in lots of information and present it. And it was a little bit spatial, but there was also these train timetables and stuff, and it was wonderful. Maybe you should write a book.
What sort of tools do you know of where you could point your map at it and say, how good is this layout? For example, if I send my screenshot to ChatGPT, is it going to do a good job of telling me what my map's like from this sort of design perspective?
Yeah, I don't know. I still put it in front of people more than I put it in front of, and that's the. But there's little techniques there in how you put it in front of people, and I do need to explore that more. But I know there's a lovely UX one where it's like 5 seconds, put them in front of them. What did you see? Pull it away. What did you see? And that helps. Did you get the information that I want you to get? Did you understand it or not? You know, and that's a lovely one to get that feel for it. And you can play around with other, like, you know, the squint test to help you understand what's important, where you squint your eyes slightly and what do you notice, and helps you sort of see the hierarchy a little bit. You can throw it into programs and blur it and, you know, do it that way as well.
Where do you go for inspiration these days? Like now that kind of Twitter spatial died off, do you have a preferred channel that you see maps that you love?
No, it's more likely to be sort of in bulk, like NASA's Atlas of Design. Like I'll always grab those. They're amazing, and they're such a breadth, and you can pour through them again and again and see the choices and symbology and little. I might go through and go, oh gosh, I need a North Arrow inspiration, and then just some amazing ones will pop out of there, you know, and that's really cool.
Yeah, it's a shame that Twitter's gone, because that was little ones that would pop out of the blue that were different and didn't always have to be perfect, you know, like this is kind of, it can be quite disheartening. There's beautiful ones, and you're like, oh my God, you don't realise someone spent 6 months on this, you know? Well, there's not a quick one that someone's made, but had some cool little techniques or ideas and wasn't finished, just feels more inviting, and I want to play with that, you know? Yeah, I tried to hop on Blue Sky, but there wasn't enough going on there, unfortunately, but yeah.
I think I perhaps have a follow-up question from Niels, which my godson actually asked me as well. So, have you got a favourite map or a preferred mapping technique or a favourite way of mapping where you try and like catch yourself and you're like, oh, this would be cool, and then you like try and force it into that, and you're like, no, this doesn't work.
I love labelling. That's my get in the zone and just doing beautiful labels and thinking about it and moving them around. I love that space, that's where I lose it. Yeah, absolutely.
Nice. We got any more questions before we break?
You talked about sort of focus and highlighting, the important parts of your graph or your map. How do you achieve this without sort of introducing your own biases into the process? Your own sort of...
So because hopefully you know the audience and you know the purpose, and so you've, with your visual hierarchy, you've thought about what's the most important information that I put in there, and that then, when I'm making a choice between labelling this or labelling that, that's helping me decide on that sort of information. But once again, it's those reviews at the end especially, right? Like, who's it for? What did they get out of it? And is there little techniques you can do there too? Because I definitely bring in my own biases and worldview, and that's the one you need to pull yourself out of your own head. And I've definitely been humbled a lot, put through something that I thought was beautiful, lovely chloropleth. It was just simple labelling. It was so great, and got it back and gone, I can't read this because I'm not spatial and I'm not used to these maps. Can you make it look like Google Maps? Do you know what I mean? And gone, and then thought about it and made it, and because of that particular person and their use, that was perfect for them, absolutely wonderful, and they did amazing things with it. Yeah.
One more.
Yeah, that was an excellent talk. It almost feels like you're hacking the eyes. I think Google do a lot of A/B testing. They put up different things, and that's how they have refined it, and they have lots of huge user base. And when I heard how they do it internally, different users actually see different maps because of how they have profiled them. There's this subtle, obviously, social engineering stuff hacking going on from their side as well, right? They check the engagement, see the style, and then they present a different map. How do you think we can do something like that? Do you do similar testing with your users? You obviously said one, but that's difficult to do at scale.
Yeah. I make a lot of small one-off bespoke maps, so it's hard to do that. And there's lots of really cool stuff they might do in university where they have the eye tracking and so it's not just what did you see in the map, it's like I can empirically say what you looked at. It's not what you said you saw, but you spent a lot of time on that north arrow, whatever it happens to be. So it will be real cool. I imagine there's lots of other, especially with your online tools, there'll be little things you can pull in there that will become easier and easier to get hold of. I think you do build up knowledge though too, I make a lot of micro decisions when I make a map, but I'm lucky because I've made so many in the past that it's kind of already been done. I've already spent the 2 hours previously umming and ahhing about that, and now it's just a quick decision, And so back to yours, it's maybe I've already had reviews in front of similar people and I'm making that choice based off that. So it's just that building up of knowledge and who the audience and whatnot, absolutely. But that's also a double-edged sword because you fall into your own traps so often. I know best because it was like this person, and they did not have the same knowledge or whatnot, or maybe they were colourblind and they just hadn't thought about that side of it, Absolutely.
Cool. That kind of concludes our session for now, as we're going to break for lunch. At lunch, don't forget there are birds of a feather sessions, and they're on the website. So have a look and see if any of those take your fancy. But can you join me in thanking Pete one last time?